And we're live here at the Heinz Auditorium, the American Bar Association's annual meeting. The ABA Journal is convening this panel on how it is the law can be, in a sense, code that is cracked. And by cracking the code, will allow this profession to move forward into the information age. So they're just getting ready to start the panel now. I'm going to switch to Dan Lear and stand by. If you tweet your questions, I'll do what I can to pass them on.
While we wait for the tour bus to arrive, to all the people, it looks like we're going to have a fairly intimate crowd here in this nice intimate space. But I figure we ought to get started. We've got a lot of really smart people here who are going to tell you about the work that they're doing. I'm Alan Pusey. I'm the editor and publisher of the ABA Journal. And for those of you who don't know, I see some familiar faces out there in the last couple of days. But the last 2 days, we, with the cooperation of Suffolk Law School, have been conducting a hackathon, the results of which were presented yesterday. And it was beyond my wildest dreams in terms of the quality of the applications that we developed over the course of 2 days that were related to the access and justice. But we thought that we would add this sort of third day element. We didn't plan on it being so early in the morning, but that was a roll of the dice with our meetings and travel people. But at any rate, we thought it would be a good idea to gather together some people knowledgeable about the uses of technology and have some sort of case studies of the way they have applied technology to problems of law and justice. So we put together a panel for you today, and I guess we've decided on an order here. I'll try to take these from this is not the order of the panel, but first of all, we have David Zvenich. Did I get that right?
Perfect.
Very cool. And David is actually general counsel of the BC government. And, but in his spare time, which I'm sure he has lots of, he operates BC Hackers. And he is sort of an autodidact as far as coding goes, as he explained to me, and how a guy can learn that much. And so, for his last 3 years or so, it's beyond me. He has some interesting applications that he's tried and developed, and he'll be telling you about them. Next to him is Tamina Rostein, and she's from Georgetown Law, and she operates
Iron Tech Lawyer Program.
Iron Tech Lawyer Program. It's really I trip my tongue that way. But she's been a real pioneer in terms of developing an entrepreneurial bent in law students and people at a law school using technology to conquer problems of law. will be a sponsor this year at the APA Journal. We're looking forward to that relationship as well. And Lear is who's with Alabama. I'll let you explain what it is that you do. He's developed some interesting applications to Lua as well. And when he finally Jason Touche. Jason is a veteran blogger, traveler, Fulbright fellow, and advocates for children. He's got quite an extensive resume for someone who barely shaves. And, I'm kind of in awe of it, but I'll let each of them explain a little bit. I mean, one of the things I'm learning about all of this is that the relationship between what they do and the development of technology is pretty personal, and perhaps each one of you can sort of give a light description of why you became fascinated with the use of technology in terms of what you do. Since these are case studies, that the person should be as much a case study as the project itself. But I think we would like to start with Tamina.
Yes, thank you.
I'll let you.
Thank you. I am a professor at Georgetown Law Center, and I teach a course on legal technologies that has picked up the name of the IronTech Lawyer Program. And in the course, the students build legal expert systems, and the course itself culminates in a competition called the IronTech Lawyer competition. And instead of writing papers or taking exams, reading books, the point of the course is the students build apps. And the kind of apps that we're building don't require coding. So they don't require programming knowledge. They're built in one platform, actually two platforms we've used over the years. And the platforms themselves allow you to get access to authoring tools, which are tools that allow you to build on top or inside the platform and create an app. The students can master these tools in about 5 or 6 weeks and then build legal expert systems. And the platform that we work with most frequently is a platform called Neurologic, which is a commercial platform. There's another fabulous platform called A2J that comes out of Cali. And there are a few others out there. Let me say a few things about what a legal expert system is. So the legal expert system is an app that replicates the thinking or the actions of a lawyer on a specific legal question. So if you think about sources of legal guidance, on the one hand you can have static text. Do you qualify for unemployment benefits? And a few long paragraphs about that. Or you could have a dialogue with an expert who then talks you through whether you qualify for unemployment. And a legal expert system lives in between those two sources of legal guidance and actually runs through a series of questions, an interview, and at the end of the interview produces tailored guidance that answers a specific question for the user. And the steps are that a legal expert system, first of all, gathers information from the user, applies the information to a reasoning engine to reach conclusions, and then generates a report that gives customized guidance. So the reasoning engine, just to say a few things about the kind of logic that can be replicated in an expert system, if-then statements, decision trees, mathematical functions, weighing tests. So many of the forms of reasoning that we see in law. And on both ends, you can integrate a legal expert system with a database. And what is going on right now, and David may talk a little bit more about that, are that a number of federal agencies are creating or making their data available through application programming interfaces. And so there's these huge databases out there connected with different government agencies, data that government agencies have collected that are now can be connected with a legal expert system. On the other end, a legal expert system can can produce a series of automated documents, a full suite, emails, PDFs, filing, memoranda, etc. And they all, when they're produced, they have the information that's needed, so someone can have a file ready, leading, and go into court. We in the class collaborate with various types of organizations, government agencies, and nonprofit legal providers, and they, and the space that we work in is access to justice, access to legal services, and the different organizations or agencies that work with identify a particular need where a legal expert system would be helpful, and also provide subject matter expertise. So that our students don't need to learn all the law that relates to a particular matter. They work with a subject matter expert who can look at the app and determine whether it accurately reflects the law. And we've identified 4 types of apps that we've built over the years. We've built, I think, about 15 or 20 apps. Students, by the way, build these in 13 weeks, so that they run in 13 weeks. And a couple of so the 4 types. One are self-help apps, and these are 2. I'm sorry, these are both on type on these. So self-help can happen in several different contexts. One is if you need to figure out if you're entitled to some form of benefit or you have some right, and so there's earned sick time advisor on. I may not actually be on. I was going to do some demonstration, but I may not be if this happens or not. Never mind, I won't demo. So there's an earned sick time advisor we built with organization called Better Balance, which is an organization in New York, New York City, that was instrumental in having the city enact a paid sick time statute. And this particular act helps someone to determine if they're entitled to paid sick time, and that it goes through the type of employment that's at issue, how long someone's been employed, and works through the various permutations of employment relationship, and then helps the user determine how much paid sick time they're entitled to. So that's a sort of legal guidance type of app. We built unemployment benefits hearing coach with the Office for Administrative Benefits in Washington, D.C. And this app is slightly different. First of all, it does help someone in their case to figure out how strong their case is to unemployment benefits, and it helps the user go into an unemployment benefits hearing and advise the user about what type of documents the user should have with them, and also gives a assessment as to how good a case it is or not, and explains the case to the user. So in a context for someone not represented, the app educates the user as to what is involved in going into a hearing and helps the user prepare, understand what the case is about, and bring the appropriate documents. The other type of app that we built involves helping volunteers, non-lawyers, to work with the people that they serve to help help the volunteers help explain the legal rights of the people that they serve. So this is a theft and eviction navigator that we built, and it's built for social workers serving the homebound elderly. And so a social worker comes in with a tablet, has the app, asks a series of questions of the client, and then can help the client navigate if they've got a landlord tenant problem or if they have a debt problem, navigate through the legal system and determine what their rights are and what recourse they have. I think, going to spend 1 second to see if I can get myself connected for this. Sorry about that, because I didn't want to demonstrate. Sorry about that. Okay, so this is, if you look at it, is the Death and Eviction Navigator, and I just wanted you to see the interface. It's a very clean interface. It actually explains what the app is supposed to do. Has the user put in a question, Smith, and then starts asking a few preliminary questions about whether a person can leave their home, what they have access to, do you have means of classification, etc., and then works through a series of, and I will quickly, no, make something up here. Okay.
You guys see the age. It's the age.
Oh, you know.
Yeah, you probably didn't want to disclose, I understand.
Yes, understood. Okay, and then, and I'm not going to work through the whole app, but the app helps the volunteer to work with the client to figure out what kind of issue the client has, and to then guide the client and help the client find the appropriate legal resources so that they can deal with whether it's a landlord-tenant case or it's a consumer debt issue. The other type of app, this is the third type of app that we build, is a triage and is a type of app that helps legal services be more efficient. And this is the kind of app we built one which is triage and intake assessment system, so that a legal services provider can determine whether, for instance, someone who wants legal services is eligible for the services, and then assess the type of case it is and help the legal services organization to assign the appropriate lawyer, and also gather information about the case so that when the client comes into the lawyer already knows enough about the case to be able to help the lawyer and doesn't have to go through a whole intake process. The last type of app is an app that actually helps decision makers to make more accurate decisions. So so it strengthens adjudicative processes and it speeds them up, but it also makes them more accurate. And the one that my students built last fall was an app they called the Military Impact Discharge Assessment System. The names come from the students. And this is an app that's intended to help veterans benefits administrators make decisions about whether a veteran is entitled to benefits. Now, we all assume that if you're a veteran, you're entitled to a whole package of benefits. It turns out that it's a very complicated scheme that turns on whether you were discharged at a level less than honorable. So that, and there's actually 4 or 5 levels below that different types of discharge that are less than honorable discharge, and also turns on how long you were active in the service and the type of discharge you might have had if you were active in different types of period of time. What this app was intended to do is to address 2 problems that the Veterans Administration was having a year ago. One is that as of March 2013, there was 900,000 cases backlog, incredible amount of cases sitting in the system. And in addition to that, there was a high rate of inconsistencies and inaccuracies. So a study was done by the Veterans Inspector General, and the study showed that there's almost a quarter of the cases that have been adjudicated inaccurately. And there's a huge amount of inconsistency among regional offices as to how cases are adjudicated. So just to give you a picture of how complicated the framework is, and this is a flow chart that my students created, and I don't expect you to read all of it, but it gives you a sense of how sophisticated, how complex this particular regulatory framework is. But it gives you an idea of what we can do with the legal expert system, which is to turn this into an application that has a very simple interface, but beneath the hood reflects all these different regulations through decision trees, mathematical functions, and other types of reasoning. This is one picture of what Midas looks like under the hood. It's a decision tree. Midas is an unbelievable number of decision trees that are interwoven together and interlocking. But you get a sense, and this is actually what the operating tool, so this is how my students built this particular application. They, this particular decision is what they see when they build the application. Okay, so let me just spend 1 minute and just walk you through Midas. To get a picture of. So this is, so as with all our apps, we always put in a disclaimer that this is not legal advice. We also put in a disclaimer making clear that as of the time the students built it, it's a student project. And then this begins by asking a series of questions about the service member, whether the service member was convicted of an offense considered a subversive activity, and then works through, for instance, what I was talking about earlier, the type of discharge that was involved, how long each service member was active service and during what period of time, and continues working through the types of issues that go to determining what kinds of benefits a service member is entitled to. And so this particular app we are is in the demonstration stage. We've shown it to a number of veterans groups to get their feedback, and now we're working with people in Veterans Administrations to get additional feedback with the goal of having veterans benefits adjudicators use this app to help them in determining entitlement to benefits. A couple of sentences about what the students get out of this experience. They, first of all, instead of doing what you do in every other class in law school, they're building something, they see what they built, they work with an organization, end up with an app that they built. And in addition to that, they learn at a more, in terms of pedagogy, they learn to think differently as a lawyer, which is to say, the building these apps does involve, obviously, learning what regulations mean, interpreting them, understanding the substance of regulations involved. But what they're learning to do is to build systems. And the reason I think this is an important addition to a legal curriculum is because more and more clients are asking lawyers to build systems, processes, rather than address each question on a one-on-one or individual basis. And so students are learning a different mind frame, which is a systems building mind frame. And they have a lot of fun, which is always a good thing when they're involved. Okay, so that's it. Let me hand it over to Jason.
I have it recorded.
Oh, you can record it.
Should be. So, while you're moving chords, there's some distance between build an app and think systemically. How do the students start to think about the system as when they're putting together their idea of this technical fit?
Well, in terms of thinking about the system, the way I think, they're not thinking about the institutional system. I think of it as building a system that answers a type of question rather than a lawyer with a certain amount of tacit knowledge that responds to each client on a one-on-one basis. So it's a legal expert system. So that's a systemic part.
Cool.
Morning, my name is Jason Sanchez. I'm the Juvenile Justice Policy Director for an organization called Advocates for Children and Youth in Baltimore, Maryland. And I'm here today both because these three wonderful people allowed me to join late to the panel, and as well myself and my partner here, John Tippins, built something called Expunge Maryland. And so I want to tell you about it. I want to, if there's nothing else to tune me out after this first slide, the one thing you can take away from this is that John and I had no experience doing any of this whatsoever before we did this project. Neither of us had a development background. Neither of us are special technologically, except for the fact that we grew up when the internet was a thing. And so, if nothing else, take away from the fact that this isn't as difficult as one would think. I start off with the more enigmatic HA2, or that should be A2J. That's unfortunate. Hashtag. This is not an Al Jazeera channel.
Right.
It's access to justice, both in the same way that we just heard about as a framework, but as well a hashtag used on Twitter that follows this discussion. For everyone here under 35, you know what a hashtag is. For those of you that grew up in the 60s, hashtag is not what you think it is. So we will, if you wanted a Twitter 101, and you're live tweeting this right now, this would be a great thing to copy and put online. Some shameless self-promotion for the wonderful people if you're on this panel. So I think, and we just heard this from the last conversation, and I think this will be the theme throughout the panel, is that the difference between the way tech approaches law and law approaches law is really important. I think that what law we all know is based on precedent. If we look at what happened, and that's the way we develop forward. Where things are headed now, though, is we want to start from scratch, and we want to look at things in a new way, increase the way people access law. We're obviously getting information in different ways, and so it's important for us to take that into consideration when we're developing these new systems. So there's two ways to do that. One is the straight up tech way where you fail quickly and fail often, or the other way is to find someone that's built a door that you kind of want to knock on and then change it for your jurisdiction. Simple term for that is open source. The idea, it's kind of the same thing as boilerplate contract language. It's where it's out there and you just kind of tailor it a little bit to whomever your client is. We did the latter for this particular project. This here is expunge.io, which is the idea that we originally stole. Anyone here from Chicago, thank you very much for a great idea. What they decided to do in Cook County was that they had a legal aid bureau with a juvenile expungement desk and no juveniles. So there's a great group there called the MICVA Challenge, and they take kids and they talk to kids about different problems, and the kids come up with ideas of how to solve them. And the kids told a group of lawyers, well, why haven't you built an app for us to access this information through? So the lawyers said, that's a great idea, we will do that. So they basically created a very simple click-through app that would allow people, mainly juveniles, to find out whether or not their misdemeanor charge could be expunged under Illinois law. So I saw that back in March, and I thought it was a great idea because I was personally trying to find a way to marry my policy and legal work with tech, and I thought this would be a good way to dip my toes in. But the question was whether or not it was relevant for Baltimore and Maryland as it was in Chicago. So I turned to Google, as most people do. This is a Google Trends breakout. If you're not familiar with Google Trends, it'll basically just tell you who's searching for what where. This is for the word expungement based on city around the country. As you can tell, Baltimore leads the pack in front of Cleveland, Cincinnati, and Salt Lake. This is normal. I've done a bunch of different searches to make sure it wasn't just a fluke. Baltimore's always in the top 3. I would blame a particular administration that we had in the city that believed arrest was the quickest way to solve all of our city's problems. By 2007, Baltimore was arresting 1/6 of its population every year. And so a lot of people have got criminal records that need to be dealt with. So there's other theories. That's the one that I most attribute to why Baltimore leads the pack. But also Maryland leads the pack as well. So it's a statewide issue. For how liberal Maryland is, it has very much a tough on crime streak in regards to its criminal justice application. So we know for sure that Maryland is a good place for an expungement app, as this is something that people are actively looking for online. So the other question is, as we were trying to develop the product, was, well, if people are already looking, what are they getting once they look? This is a basic breakout of Maryland criminal record expungement. I'll go to the first 5 and say why they're good and why they're bad. If there's anyone here from the Maryland judiciary, I respect you and your profession very much, but I have a problem with the document that comes up when you search for criminal record expungement in Maryland, which is both response 1 and 3 on this search. It's the same PDF. It's 20 pages long. If you are an average person without a legal education, the last thing you want to do is read a 20-page PDF on every aspect of expungement law in the state of Maryland, right? Your question is, I have a particular issue. I would like to solve my particular issue. I don't care about the larger narrative around expungement in the state. So in that regard, it's not terribly useful to your average person seeking help. Secondly, there's not a single phone number or referral service within the 20 pages. So even if you had follow-up questions, it doesn't tell you who to follow up with. So it's a dead end. So if you can interpret the document, great and good for you. If you can't, you've got troubles. So you'd probably click on the second thing you find in that Google search, which is the thing on the right-hand side, which is our Department of Corrections page on expungement law in Maryland. This is a bullet-pointed version of the 20 pages you see on the left. The only cross-reference they make is back to the 20-page document. So this tautological cycle of information that just feeds on itself, and it doesn't actually get anyone any step closer to actually getting the service that they are looking for. Answers 4 and 5 on the Google search. One is by NOLO, which is a great group, but this particular page is legally inaccurate. If anyone here is from or has friends at NOLO, I've been trying to contact them to update that page. They have been less than quick to respond. And then the other is the People's Law Library, also a really great resource in Maryland to try to break down law in an easier to digest way. But again, the same problem as the other documents. It doesn't then take the next step. It gives you some information, but the second step is never taken to connect the person doing the search and getting them to a service provider. So that's where we come in. We created expungemaryland.com explicitly to bridge that particular gap. We knew people were searching. We knew what they were finding or not finding once they did search. And we wanted to become a clearinghouse for everything expungement related in the state of Maryland. So this includes everything from the basics of how to get your criminal record to can or can I not expunge my criminal record and walking them through the statute. To get there, we had to ask ourselves a number of questions that I've never had to ask before, nor have I was taught to ask them in law school, because I didn't have wonderful classes like the one we heard about before me. So we had to ask ourselves, what did we want this project to look like? And more importantly, techie questions like, are we going to release it as a downloadable app in an app store? Or are we going to run it as a web-based app? What makes the most sense for the clientele that we're looking to reach? We decided to make it a web-based app because for the more impoverished folks in Baltimore City, a smartphone is certainly not something in their budget line, but they do often access the internet through the public library system, which is quite good in Baltimore. So it made sense for us to have it up as a website to reach more people. But on the flip side, we understand that a lot of people do use smartphones, as I'm sure everyone in this room does. So we made the site responsive, which basically means that when you pull it up on your phone, it will scale to the screen on your phone. So it's useful for everybody without having to worry about whether or not it's in the Apple Store or not. The other big thing for us was usability and ease of access. As we heard before, things need to be simple, they need to be clean, they can't be cluttered. The law is complicated enough within itself. And so we had to do the flowchart thing as well. My father wanted me to get an MFA and not a JD, so this is the greatest piece of abstract art I have to date. At least that's what I tell him. This is Maryland's juvenile sealing and adult expungement statute broken down into yes and no questions. This, more than the coding, and this is why I think everyone can do this, because everyone here has some capacity of a legal mind. This is the time-consuming part, and this is the thing that you are all experts at. The coding part's actually the really easy thing to do, but making the law easy to understand and binary is a little bit more difficult, and that's where we are going to play a role in the growing civic tech movement. And I think that's important to remember. So we have this website, and I will show you one click through. So we have background information on what is expungement, the steps to expunge, but the appy part is this: can I expunge my criminal record? We make quite clear that this is not legal advice because heaven forbid we get sued. Of course, it's only applicable in Maryland. We'll say the person was 18 and that they received an acquittal on whatever their single charge was. As part of that usability aspect, your rap sheet will have a bunch of terms that most people don't use in their day-to-day: lingua franca, acquittal, nol pros, stet. So we wanted to make sure that that word is clear, because if they have their rap sheet in front of them, that's the word they're going to be basing their decisions off of when they answer these questions. But we also wanted to make sure that they were colloquially defined. So we put hovers over any even remotely legal term to try to make it a little bit easier. And this was an important tightrope for us to walk, somewhere between it being legally accurate and colloquial enough for the average person with a 6th grade education to understand. As you can imagine, the lawyers think that we're too loose with language, and the people with the 6th grade reading level think we're too legally. So it's difficult, and it's certainly an evolutionary process to find out where that sweet spot is. We were not released without a charge. We were charged with just one crime. We were not found guilty, but here's acquittal. Again, we have, you'll be able to pull this up and read it better on your phone. I imagine that is rather small. So we'll say yes to acquittal. There's a 3-year statute of limitations to expunge in the state of Maryland. That's why this question's there. And then we work with different legal aid groups around the state. And so this makes sure that the referral goes out to the right organization that we work with. For the sake of argument, we'll assume we're in Baltimore City. And then you get a very simple form. You put your name and your contact information, how you heard about us, whether or not you have your rap sheet, and you hit submit, and it goes directly to the Maryland Volunteers Lawyer Service, and they do their follow-up there. It's extremely simple. They were very enthusiastic supporters of the program, as with Midshore Pro Bono. And so we're in every county in the state except for 3. So we're quite happy with that. And so that's what a good outcome on the app looks like. But we want to make sure that no matter who you were and what your criminal record was, you would have something to come away with, even if you can't expunge your record. So this is the can't expunge page, which is mainly a bunch of employment and job training assistance programs that are there for people to take advantage of at their will, depending on where they live in the state. So hopefully, no matter who you are, you came away a little bit richer from using the site than you otherwise would. We've been live for only 22 days so far. We've had 15 referrals out to legal services already. People are spending time on the site with an average of 3.5 minutes. We have a 0% bounce rate, which is awesome. And what that means basically is that if you go to a home page and then you leave that home page immediately, that's a bounce because you didn't click deeper into the site. 0% bounce rate means that everyone who has come to the site has gone deeper into the site, which is a very important number to follow to make sure that people are actually using it. So for this program and what's next, I think we're beginning to meld with some of the government agencies in the state because they think it's interesting and smart and useful. And we would like ultimately to get this to the point of an e-file system within the court where we merge with Maryland's struggling e-file system to make sure that people can use the app actually all the way through to file at the end. That is what I have to share. Any questions at the end, of course. And John, if you have really technical questions, he will be the person to get in the weeds with. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
So that, I guess that's me.
Mm-hmm.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Dan Lear. I am formerly a practicing attorney as of 2 weeks ago. I think what brings me here, I guess there's a few things that I'm doing, but I wanted to sort of attack this maybe from a little bit of a different tack. So I'm the co-founder of a legal technology and innovation group. We call ourselves Legal Hackers. And I've been doing that for about 8 or 9 months. I also, as was mentioned, just took a job working for AVO as their Director of Industry Relations. And so what I'll be doing is engaging with folks like you, engaging with the folks like the American Bar Association and local bar associations to help them understand how we can help lawyers to use the internet and use the amazing tools that are available through technology to grow their practices and and hopefully also increase access to legal services. I think that's a huge part of our mission and obviously what we're talking about here today. But I think, as was mentioned at the beginning, this panel was kind of a follow-on to this legal hackathon that was held yesterday. And I guess that was the other point that I would add, is I've been involved in organizing this event, and I also helped to raise money and organize a legal hackathon held in Brooklyn that was on the topic of data privacy back in early February. But frequently when I talk to lawyers, they say, like, a legal hackathon, or what is this legal hacking, or what are we talking about? And so maybe, I'm sure that most of you who bothered to get out of bed this early in the morning, we may have self-selected into a group for whom this notion is already relatively familiar, but I feel like with a lot of lawyers I have to explain that. So first of all, we are not the steal your identity and go to the French Riviera type of hackers. Yeah, exactly. Or else we wouldn't be here. But the original notion of hacking, and I think this is a relevant story, and it's one I really like to share, and I think it will resonate with what you've heard already and what Dave's going to talk about, was, and again, I may be sort of preaching to the choir, but I really like this story, was actually, and the notion of the hacker ethos was actually born out of MIT, just across the river here. There's Daza, that's our little shout out. And it was actually, interestingly enough, born out of the Tech Model Railroad Club in the 50s and 60s at MIT. These were folks who were fascinated with watching trains, setting up model trains, complicated model train systems that had, not surprisingly, circuits and switches. And so when MIT, which was probably one of the first campuses in the country, was able to get their hands on a huge room-filling version of this back in the 50s and 60s, these model train enthusiasts were absolutely enamored with this machine. And they did whatever they could to get their hands on it. And as they used it, they developed this kind of culture developed about how they used it and what they did, and they would do anything they could. So the time was limited that students could actually use the computer. So they'd stay up at night and like not sleep just to be able to get time on the computer, because there was one on the campus, and they would short of breaking it, they would do anything they could just to make it do interesting, weird things. And this is where this notion of hacking came from. It was, and the term, there's a dispute about sort of where it came from, but it was this kind of ethos that you want to get your hands on something, you want to figure out how it works, you want to try to push it to its limits, you want to understand it. And one of the classic examples, and if you're interested in hacker culture, which is a really fascinating subculture, there's a great book written by a well-known journalist named Stephen Levy called, I can't remember if it's Heroes, I think it's Heroes of the Computer Revolution, and the main title is Hackers. But he tells this story about one of these early hackers, and he had some high-level calculus or math assignment. And so he got time on the computer, and he basically, and I think this is exactly what we're talking about with expert systems, and exactly, I think, highlights something about about the way we think about the delivery of legal services and why using technology in legal services is so important. But so he got time on this computer, and he taught the computer to do his math assignment. And he printed it out or brought the program. Again, I did grow up in the era of the internet, so maybe he brought punch cards to his professor. I don't know. This is before my time. But he came to the professor and he said, look, I taught this computer to do your assignment. And you would expect more from the professor, but the professor looked back at him and said, but you didn't show your work, so I'm not giving you credit. And that is exactly what's so fascinating about what's happening here and what you're seeing with Tanina's program, what Jason has done, is this is not, and this is no disrespect to the billable hour, I know we hate it, love it, whatever, but this is not just cranking things out in 6-minute increments. This is a higher level understanding of how legal systems work and how they function. And there's incredible value, and we now have the tools to enable our profession to embrace this notion of law and these notions of what we've created through the legal system in an amazing, amazing way. And I think what you've seen here are demonstrations of that. And I really love that story, because when we think about legal education, when we think about training lawyers, this is a really amazing opportunity, and it's an incredible opportunity to provide services to people and to do things that a lot of folks either don't want to be paid to do, can't afford to do, but really needs to be done. To talk quickly about the project that I'm working on, and we're still very much in early prototyping, back in that hackathon in Brooklyn in February, we heard a really inspiring talk by a woman who's a federal district court judge in Oregon about a really innovative drug court, and I always have to be careful about how I phrase this, drug court reentry program. This is not people re-entering drug court. This is people leaving drug court, re-entering society. And so she developed this program to help folks who go through drug courts in their return to full activity in society. And this program was not technologically based, but this particular judge, her name is Ann Aiken, is very inspired by what technology can do and how it can help in the criminal justice system. So she came to this hackathon and pitched a group of folks, basically said, what I want to do is I want to build an application, just maybe even a smartphone app, that will help my drug court participants in their reentry process, that can scale the types of social services that we know all of these folks need, but just can't be made available given the constraints of our current economy. And so we have been working on this project. We've been working with her. We've been working with other folks over the last 6 to 8 months to kind of get the pieces in position and to kind of get things ready to move forward. And I unlike these folks, and maybe unlike what I've been preaching, I have not yet had a chance to actually do anything, and that aggravates me, and I'm frustrated that I don't have anything to show you. But I am excited to say that through the help of Daza, who gave the shout out to MIT earlier, he's going to run a course through the MIT Media Lab that he's effectively calling Legal Hackathon, and he's going to get MIT graduate students and other folks to participate in about a half-dozen projects over the course of the coming semester, one of which will be this reentry program that we're working on, in which we'll take these ideas, build them out, and by the end of the semester at least have a prototype or something that we can begin to use and iterate on as these folks are doing, and learn how we can better serve the individuals in these programs. So that's kind of where I'm coming at it from. It's a really interesting project, and I think that's all I wanted to say. Happy to talk more about reentry. There's reentryapp.net is our website, so you can check out who's involved with the project and see what's going on there. There's also lots of video content and other things, but I think that the opportunities of what you're seeing up here, I think before I was steeped in this culture and in this kind of the legal technology space, I used to look at things like this and think, oh yeah, whatever, like that's a real edge case thing. But the technology is getting good enough, the lawyers are getting smart enough as it relates to technology that we're really starting to do some things that are, I think, going to change the landscape of the way the legal system functions, and I think it will change it for the better. So with that, I'll turn this over to Dave.
Government. I'm a coder. I'm here to talk about the ability to the best of times was the worst. As we talk to lawyers in this conference, you're likely to get two very different futures. One thing that you'll hear is that it's going to be nasty, bluish, and short. The academy is failing. Legal service providers are failing. Business will no longer be able to be as rich as it was in the past. We want to have huge monolithic firms with businesses that are run not as blind direct service clients, but turning. It's a really, really, I think that the future is going to be quite different. I think that the future that we're likely to see is inspiring. It's an inspiring one, and it is grounded in the fact that we can see right now that law can be humane, law can be efficient, and that they can be both at the same time. So this is the only PowerPoint slide that I have. That is the only abstraction that we're looking at. Now I will show you how I can do that. This is the U.S. government printing office's website. On the U.S. government printing office's website, we have the same PowerPoint resource. Browse application, we have a lot of codes. I'm not going to show you the video site, I'm going to show you Scout. You only have heard of Scout? Scout is a product that's put out by the Summit Foundation. It is free. Scout, with one simple word click, can give you all of the bills of Congress with the word free. It can give you all of the court opinions with the word free. It can give you all of the federal regulations with the word free. It can give you all of the state bills with the word free. It can give you oversight reports and speeches in Congress with the word free. It can do this with any word. The way that this happens is because government data is increasingly become open. And by allowing the public to access information that previously was possible and available now, you can get an email and directly to your inbox with an update on whatever you're doing. So, for example, my wife, I am the conflict for the Council of District of Columbia, and as you might imagine, what happened on the bill to the District of Columbia. Using Scout, I was able to identify a bill that was of significant interest to us faster than using people on the code and use Scout. This is the Federal Register. This is the website of the Federal Register. The Federal Register has what's called an EPI. By show of hands, who knows what an EPI is? Who's ever used an EPI? So I'm not asking you to use the API, but frankly, we went to learn, develop those families, and go and interact with documentation, and you actually practice using the API. That's documentation. But you don't have to use the API if you don't like, because you can actually use documents. There's another project that's on the I'm not going to do this for the last Summit Foundation. document is a website that uses the API that Federal Register puts out. But here I am, and go ahead and include. Now I've got all of the dockets in the Federal Register that were included. And this is kind of neat. Let's say I go to Food and Drug Products. In 2011, I can see the timeline. I can see the most recent comments. You can actually look at the documents that they have attached to it. Whether you go to the source, depending. It allows you to see individual organizations and the submissions that they sent and the mentions in various documents and when. And it's on the site. You can actually see comments and group them by similarity to other. This particular example is not very good, but you can actually look at the similarity between each other based on that. So imagine that you are trying to have some particular Federal Register, or you want to see what, for example, this is a really recent example, interesting Amazon Prime error extension. Will maybe see the document. If they directly to it, sure enough, there's a vice president of global public policy at Amazon.com asking the FAA for the authority to provide it. All right. This is a website called oversight.gov. It is a remarkable thing. It was written not by the government. It was written by individual actors. They have taken the time and energy to scrape inspectors general websites across the government and it's compiled all of them into a single database so that you can search across all inspectors general. So for example, that's not they're working on it. And again, this is not something the government is doing. This is what people are doing trying to make it better for individuals. So if I want to type in group, or you objective, there are no very no type in group. Let's try something different. Let's try something really different. Hey, we have 28 articles related to things. There they are. The court listener. Who's heard of court listener? Court listener is a website put together by two programmers in California that they call Free Law Project. Court listener allows you to search, as you can see, 350 jurisdictions, federal, state, jurisdictions. Both appellate and trial levels, depending on what you're saying. These both use the same state of technology. So if I want to type in here, you have 79 results included from all of the courts across America that can be done. Again, this is put together for free for the public using publicly available documents. So if all of this sounds like this is you can search and find it, and that's cool. These are some documents in practice of law. OpenFDA. FDA is a product that is truly ready. They put out public information about three different things: drugs, devices, food. Let's say you are, I don't know, trial, and you've got a particular drug that you could be interested in. You might want to check out the FDA database before you take the test, before you go to the study, to see what happens. As an available, you got to do it. If you know how to use this code, or other developers know how to use it for you, it becomes extremely powerful in the practice. I'm going to show you the consumer bank helping build the CFPB the consumer complaints that have been received by consumer financial protection bureau. Sorted by company, sorted by date, sorted by company response, and a respond time. So if you've got a dispute with a consumer has engaged another consumer engaged in defendant and be able to it's all available publicly, all available and that's through the consumer financial protection bureau. So I've also used this in my own practice. This is what they call effective data. One of my tasks is to track when laws become effective in Colombia. It should be a simple task, but it is not. The way that Congress has seen fit to determine when our laws go into effect is to say that they go into effect 30 days after the law is signed by the mayor, transmitted to Congress. But it's not 30 regular days, it's 30 days excluding Saturdays, Sundays, and holidays. Okay, fine. And any day in which neither house is in session because of adjournments in die or recess of more than 3 days or an adjournment of more than 3 days, beginning on the date it is transmitted to the speaker. Okay? So in order to keep track of when a law becomes effective, I actually have to know when Congress is in session. So as a practical matter, when we used to, before F date, the way that I had to find out when a law became effective was we had to have 2 calendars, actually 3 calendars. We had to have the House calendar, we had to have the Senate calendar, and we had to have a normal calendar with holidays. And we had to basically go one by one, check it off. You can imagine how much time and energy spent on this project. Now, if I transmit on May 1st, is effective on June 13th. It tells you all the days that it counted. And the way this works is using that same GPO website. I've got a list of every day the House was in session from 1996 to the present day. Every day that the Senate was in session from 1996 to the present day. Oops, error. And every period of recess of more than 3 days since Congress was in session, 1996. I've also had the fortune of opening up the data set. This is the code of the District of Columbia. Previously, this was only available on a web portal that did not allow for permanent URLs, did not allow for cross references and cross linking, and certainly didn't provide for primary source material. Now, it's all available, and you can do it on your phone. This is SCOTUS Servo. This is my signature now. SCOTUS Servo follows the Supreme Court's website. It goes to this website every 5 minutes. It checks whether any opinions have been changed, and it tweets it automatically. But since I launched it in June, I've been able to find several changes in Supreme Court's websites. Shout out to the ABA Journal, they've covered this in its most recent issue. SCOTUS Bookmarks, this is a project by Ed Summers. SCOTUS Bookmarks keeps track of reference routes. It identifies the fact that the Supreme Court publishes opinions, and then the websites that it relies on disappear. There are efforts to try to fix this, but one thing that was just purely of interest is who quotes the internet most. Turns out that it's Kennedy. But if you thought that this was pure, just purely interesting and not really necessarily valuable to lawyers, I challenge you to look at the next research. There's a person in the audience today who was able to use government websites and government data to determine the likely authorship of procurement opinions by the Supreme Court. That person is William Lee. He's a graduate student at MIT. He was able to determine with some degree of certainty that it was not, in fact, Chief Justice Roberts who wrote the dissenting opinion in Scalia's decision. That it was likely Scalia or Kennedy, and so you can debunk the mythology that the Chief Justice wrote the majority and minority opinion in the Obamacare decision. You can also tell with some degree of certainty that, let's see if I can find the page directly, you can find out using the phraseologies of the individual justices that Justice Sotomayor is most likely to use circumstances in which, and Ginsburg is stated the reason stated these unigrams or bigrams or trigrams end up in their writing more often for certain justices than for others. Similarly, Jan Katz, professor at Michigan State Law School, has used the same sort of techniques to predict the behavior of the Supreme Court with an alarming accuracy of 70%. Then you have things like Congress edits, which keeps track of when members of Congress or their staff change Wikipedia entries from their government computers in Congress. Funny real-life implication of this. They have parallel sites in other countries. And there's, I don't remember what the Russian site is, but it was a Russian site that was basically using the same code as Congress edits that determines that when the Ukraine crisis happened, they started changing information essentially about what was going on in an effort to whitewash what was happening. And I will stop there and
Don't stop. But isn't there some way that we could know the authentic record? Isn't there? If only there was a uniform law.
Right.
Is there no way?
Yeah, well, I mean, there are. I could go on and on and on
Maybe just
about
that
all
one thing.
of how open data can make our practice better. But I simply want to conclude by saying that this is all happening right now. And the future is quite bright. There is very little doubt in my mind that as lawyers embrace technology and as developers embrace lawyers, that partnership will make it easier for lawyers to do their jobs, make it better for the government to deliver services to individuals, and make it more just for people who are involved in the legal system. So thank you very much for coming, and thank you for allowing me to present.
It's a tremendous panel. I would urge you to take advantage of it by asking some questions. Do you have any questions?
Question about the apps, and I mean, you put a disclaimer on that you're not giving legal advice, but I mean, what kind of, I mean, is there any concern there still that you are giving legal advice? You can say you're not giving legal advice, but you know, what, has there been any challenges to that, or any?
Well, not surprisingly, LegalZoom has been sued in various states on the ground that they were engaging in unauthorized practice of law. Decisions are starting to emerge. We have certain different positions that we take on this. There is concern that we might be sued. We are publishing apps, meaning that we don't have people in particular by so we fall into the publishing mode and the software mode. In addition to that, we as the organization that is assisting other organizations to create apps, we're actually not the ones who are hosting the apps. And then we think that the disclaimers basically take care of it. The hope and the expectation is that the law is going to evolve so that when someone gets on the site, the fact that we make clear that we're not providing the advice, or more particularly that the organization that's sponsoring, publishing it, makes that clear, will deal with the issue of anonymous content. Long answer to yes, there is some concern.
And I would add that, especially for the expungement app, basically what the role it takes is a paralegal, not an actual attorney, a bar attorney. And so they're doing field questions that an undergrad and intern, someone that's not barred could do. So in that regard, we also do the disclaimer thing just to make sure, but also on a practical level, it's not as if the app acts as an attorney doing the signature on a court filing.
Is there one place that lists all available websites?
The internet.
You basically have to Google to kind of figure out what you're trying to find.
This is actually one of the great problems that we actually have not figured that part out. There are some federated sites, for example, data.gov is a pretty good website for raw data sets. There are emerging lists, but they are not, frankly, great. And part of the problem is that they're very, I think that the environment is somewhat unstable in the sense that they keep on being new apps that are developed almost every day that have a new take on it. When the DC code was launched, to give a specific example, within a month of putting the code available online, there were 4 different versions showing the same data in different ways. And so depending on your particular case, you could use one viewer versus another viewer. So it's a very good question, and it's frankly one that I think we ought to do a better job of collecting. As the hackathon, one of the conversations that we had is that there are so many great forums and so many examples that just people don't know about, and we're relying on sort of traditional means of communicating the message through news media and whatnot. But we probably need to be better about collecting.
Just to add to that, the one place to find access to justice apps is through Pro Bono Net, which actually has a one platform, Law Help Interactive, that actually connects with a bunch of different kinds of apps. The challenge isn't just finding the apps, but it's the non-duplication or reinventing the wheel or versions on the same wheel. And so there are preliminary conversations I've been trying to talk our digital librarians, who luckily are not here yet, but into creating repositories, and so that people who are looking for access to justice apps can find both the apps and actually design documents that help other people to build similar apps.
I can't help but throw this one thing because it reminded me of something. Developers have actually figured this problem out in many respects. The software community, perhaps supporters, we should certainly be learning from this. They have package managers, and they allow for essentially really robust search of code to figure out whether someone's already done it. And that is something that maybe we're considering for legal service apps, is a package manager for legal service apps.
Oh, you should do Rusty.
I noticed that most of the apps that I'm hearing about focus on the solving the problem for the existing legal framework, as opposed to taking a look at what's the problem that we're dealing with and saying, can we reinvent the legal framework? Has there been any work that you've seen where actually, like over in the UK, they have an online small claims court which goes end to end and sort of takes the problem out of the existing legal framework into a private setting that functions? Have you seen anything like that?
Well, from my standpoint, not really. I think we're seeing a push largely from the executive and from the legislature for it, but I don't think we've seen the same degree of engagement from the judiciary. That's not to say that it won't happen or that it hasn't happened, but I'm not aware of it. There's been much deeper embrace by the executives in federal, state, and local governments for open data. And legislatures obviously have been very engaged to varying extents. The judicial data remains, frankly, complicated and difficult to access. And in terms of reinventing their processes, it does tend to be, tech is not the first thing that they're considering.
And I know that you know about this, but to share with the broader audience, I think there are beginning to be some interesting developments in the online dispute resolution field. The classic example, and I think this is just such an interesting and fascinating example, is eBay. I don't want to misquote this, but I know that the number is high, but I want to say that they resolve in 1 year more disputes than are resolved through the court systems of both North and South America combined. And mind you, these are international disputes, across time zones, people who have never interacted face to face and never will. So I think it's early days. I really do. I think that what you saw here today is really just the cusp of what we'll see in the future. I mean, when you begin to think about, I think it's early days, and it's interesting to think how it's going to evolve. But I think ODR is one example of how some opportunities are opening up in that business.
Question for Dan, but maybe a couple other people can comment on this. But so it seems like there's lots of unmet need or opportunities, basically. And then the last couple of days, there's been this hackathon, this coding party the last couple of days. I suppose there's other models that are possible, whether it's these meetup groups or a course or other things or community existing organizations kind of taking this on. I'm wondering if you can kind of comment on which other communities you're most excited about engaging, or what kind of formats or models you think are most exciting, to sort of the next low-hanging fruit or the next thing to tackle.
Sure, I'll plug a couple of my products in this, not the products that Avo produces, because those are great, but specifically some activities that I'm involved with that I do for free. As I mentioned, I'm the co-founder of a legal technology and innovation group in Seattle. We were talking about this yesterday, so I won't go on. But there are groups like this popping up all over the country. In fact, I just was sending some information to somebody about this last night, and I bet you if you Googled legal hackers and Robert Richards, Robert studies Robert Richards. People might have to be on RCC. Shout out to Steve. Ostensibly he studies legal informatics at Penn State, but he had a list of like 20 groups. So there are various groups of different sort of levels of momentum and activity emerging really throughout the world. Actually, particularly I know Seattle, and again very excited. Seattle, Portland, LA, Bay Area, Austin, New York, DC, Detroit, Atlanta. So there's that kind of grassroots movement, and increasingly all of these are connected. Another really interesting format, again, this is something I'm next weekend in the Bay Area will be the first ever legal technology startup weekend events, and I won't go into what that is, but it's an opportunity for folks over the course of basically 2 days to gather about 100 people and to select about half a dozen projects over those 2 days that are specifically related to legal technology. Over 2 days, they will endeavor to bring as close to kind of a fully fleshed out business plan with prototype as possible. I think that's a really interesting kind
kind of emerging idea. Again, that's in the Bay Area next weekend, and then folks that I work with are going to go on a similar event in Seattle in October. Happy to tell people about that. And that's done under the umbrella of a really great organization called Startup Weekend. They're a nonprofit that just happens to be based in Seattle, but they're all over the world. And they put on these types of events that are not legal technology focused, that are just on startups and entrepreneurship. All over the world. I'd also just give a shout out to Nina and what she and a lot of innovative law schools are doing to get these skills and these tools in the hands of lawyers in law school. To get them to embrace and understand the value not only of technology as a word processing medium, but as something that can be, and again, I think everyone on this panel, and I'm probably least technologically adept as it goes, but everybody here learns these coding chops on the side, and I think that's something that everyone can do. So I think the other fascinating thing is that increasingly everyone's interconnected and everyone's talking. So I think there is a growing network of just legal technology folks who are passionate about this space, communicating with one another, that are really kind of moving these ideas forward.
I'll also take a crack at this. I'm pretty excited about the prospect of legal service providers, particularly engaging this space. I think that there's a huge potential for organizations in DC, in particular that work with indigent populations, significantly working with clients very frequent basis. This seems to be a very fertile ground for innovation, and it's frankly a huge area that there's a lot of need. The great news is that you can't really get worse in terms of technology as it is right now. The technology's cool. I mean, we're still using pen and paper for a lot of work. I know this from personal experience. I'm at the Lieutenant Court in DC. We finally issued these tables. It's done on pen and paper, a triplicate. It's handed to the clerk. It's handed to the parties. That's not how we're supposed to be doing modern day litigation. It is the norm. It's the practice. Significantly good jurisdiction. And so I think that the really exciting next phase for this area is to put attention and focus on the service communities. Shout out to the Human Services Corporation, let's identify this and try to resource and fix it. By providing better technology to legal service providers, it has the sort of the secondary effects are pretty profound. You have an open source tool for case management that is using. You can see how a lawyer in a small and medium-sized firm can say, hey, that is clean too. If you have an e-discovery platform, there's at least one right now that's open source. If you have an e-discovery platform that's open source that was used by Redwood City in DC, you can imagine that it can be used by small, medium-sized, or even large firms. And so there are potential secondary effects that I think you can get with legal service providers. And certainly for state and government, ATM and federal government is putting in some good stuff. Presidential Innovation Hub, Total American Hubs, which is really great things that are being used in the public and private sectors. So, I'm not personally all that interested in sort of the finances aspect of this. I'm kind of lawyer, so I have the luxury of not having to worry about the finance, and I have the luxury of not having to worry about the oil and all of those things. But I imagine that if there were tools that were built for those folks' minds that were open source, for the networking developers and the lawyers who are focused on stuff, that you could have tools that are very useful.
And I think the corollary to that is from my perspective, I'm grant funded by large foundations. And it has been extremely difficult to convince them that these types of projects are worth funding. I've had multiple multinational big names in foundational giving tell me, well, this idea is great, but we don't know what we would do with that or why this should be a thing that we're doing. The Knight Foundation is really good. They're probably the most innovative foundation on this front. Nonprofits, that's fine. But the other ones are very slow to think that this is, something that they can do. I think a lot of this, and this is true in the legal community as the foundation communities, they think that this is a step beyond anything that they comprehend, and therefore they're just not going to even try to walk through the door. And so it's on us to tell people that that's simply not the case, that actually we're already trained for this, we just need to show it in a different way.
I just have to compare that to IBM wondering why any individual would want to. Right.
Yeah.
My question was for the non-technical lawyer that has, some non-acquaintance with the concepts. What would you recommend studying if taking courses on the side of database administration or Python or there's a lot of places to get lost instead of
I can speak from personal experience. I taught myself essentially over the last 2 years, and I think there's no better way to learn it than to try to build an app. And it doesn't necessarily matter what language you're using. It doesn't necessarily matter which platform you're using. My first real challenge said, someone told me to scrape a website. I said, fine. So actually, I don't know, what was that real quick? This website was my first app. I still use it. I actually just got an email from earlier today. Is all of these sole source contracts that the district government has issued. And if you want to look at the source code so you can see how I did it. This is it. And my first scraper was this. It's not that long. It's 80 lines. And this is actually, if you wanted to learn to code, I can think of no better way than to just look at what other people have done, figure out what they're doing, like look up what PyQuery is, look up what DN to text is, mail helper, those types of things, and just explore the documents. I think that Python's a great starter language. It's really powerful. It's really robust. There's a great community. You get a lot of help on Stack Overflow, and get a lot of information through Googling. I don't use it, it's not my primary language anymore, but it's a really powerful one, and I recommend it highly.
Sorry, I wanted to just really quickly give a shout out to Bill Palin here. Taught himself to code in the last 6 months, and he was the winner of the Access to Justice Hackathon. Developed a fascinating and really great looking applications to help with that's not healthcare director.
Help me. It was proxies.
Yeah, proxies. So and I remember I had a conversation maybe last night. Like you decided you want to build an app, so you learn Objective C. I think, and actually I originally connected with Dave volunteer to start teaching lawyers code, and that's how we got connected. So I'm going down that path now. But I think if I go back on the hacker ethos, the imperative to get your hands on it. I decided to start hacking around with HTML just because it's a start, right? It's relatively easy. If you feel like you figure that out, then it might be that much easier. Just and W3 Schools is a site that I've been pretty dry, but it's relatively user friendly. In just like learning HTML. So but I think Dave's right there. Tons. I mean, if you type learn to code into Google. I mean, there you will have endless resources, and probably Google's good enough that their own SEO now that what you'll find on the first page will probably be quite quality opportunities, and again, at little or no cost.
we've reached the witching hour, which is kind of hard to do this early in the morning. At any rate, I've had the opportunity to sit back not only and listen to our panelists, but watch people here. And I think you've been a tremendously attentive audience. Really appreciate Jay for showing up, for being here, and you're being so attentive and interested in what these people are doing, and people like them. To lead one last theme, the thing that has been, as a sponsor of this, the thing that has impressed me most over the last several days, and hackathon and this panel today, is that the sense of optimism that pervaded what we were doing. And it struck me, I mentioned this at yesterday evening, but it seems to me that you do have two camps. You have a pessimistic camp and you have an optimistic camp. And it seems to me that they bear out in two types of lawyers. You have one who approached it as a profession and a good way to make a living and buy a car and buy a really nice car and join a country club or something. And then you have other people who are in it for the ability to help people solve their problems. They're problem solvers. They approach the law as a tool to help other people. And there's no problem with making money. I'm certainly not against it. But if you approach your profession in a way that is personally beneficial to you, in the sense of your spirit, in the sense of what you give, in the sense of having pride in what you do for other people, then I think you're open to these kinds of opportunities. And they can be as pessimistic as they like to, and other moves around the Heinz Center today. But I love the optimism here. I'm glad that the ABA Journal is part of that sort of optimistic and forward-thinking look. And once again, thank you for being here. Thank the panelists for a wonderfully illuminating discussion. And if you want to hang around, we certainly have plenty of places to sit. And if you want to talk with the panel on your own, feel free to do so. I think they'd be happy to discuss things with you. They've been generous with their time over the last few days. So thank you. Thank you for coming, and hope to see you again soon.
I do need to still have, if there are any lawyers who want to learn code, email me at dave@esp.io. I'll be happy to start teaching it.
Is that under the journalists?
It is.
And that's the way the panel went this morning in Copley Square at the ABA annual conference. And this session by ABA Journal on cracking the law. Turns out some of these guys are going to be available at our legalhackathon.org, MIT online sort of learning and collaboration opportunity this coming semester. If you have more questions in particular for Dan Lear about Reentry app, you can ask me. You can even jump in Reentry app. So I hope that you've learned something here that's going to instill curiosity and engagement in hacking the law. It's your law. It always has been. Hacking.